One thing I've started saying in terms of the time piece of it is real estate is not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get rich for sure scheme. It just takes a long time.
Yep. And time cures all. All those mistakes, all those learning lessons, over a 20-year period, the rent inflation erases all those mistakes, and it's all good if you can hold on for that long period. Yeah. Awesome. Please.
I should have listened to this podcast in my 20s. That's what I should have done.
Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with Jeff Osterhout and Drake Blaybaum. Those of you who are a regular subscriber to the podcast or the YouTube channel, I'm sure you know Drake by now. He's one of my business partners in multiple investments that we have together. He's an incredible real estate and mortgage advisor and coach, and one of my closest friends. So it's great to have you back again, Drake. And today we invited our buddy Jeff. Jeff is 3 years into his journey as a real estate investor, someone who's trying to escape the rat race by accumulating cash flow rather than accumulating assets that we get into retirement and then we kind of cannibalize to live off of. But he's decided to make a bold turn. So from asset accumulation to cash flow accumulation. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit more, but I'm excited to hear, his journey in 3 short years. He has 11 cash flow positive rental units, or doors as we call them, because if you have a 7-plex, then that's 7 doors in one building. And he's also in the middle of a major flip, which is a purchase, renovation, and sale. So I'm sure we're going to dive into that. So Jeff, super glad to have you today. Drake, super glad to have you today. How are you guys doing?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. My first podcast ever. I listened to a lot, so excited to be on this side of it.
Well, we should just turn it over to you then, and you can just espouse wisdom for the next 50 minutes. This should be easy, Jeff.
50 minutes? We'll put some of your listeners to sleep doing that. But
Oh man, well, thanks so much for being here. And we were, as we were kicking off, we were just talking about oftentimes when we do these podcasts, we invite people who have been in the game for 20 years. And we've forgotten all of the fear, the trepidation, the micro steps it took to get started. And now we're just kind of running at a fast pace. And so it's a pleasure to have you here, because I want you to help us remember emotionally what it felt like to take that leap of faith into your first couple of properties. Walk us through what has really been revelatory to you in terms of going through that experience and what maybe you didn't expect. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of little nuggets there that we'll pull out of you. So thanks for being here. And Drake, great to have you back as well, my friend.
Glad to be here.
Cool. Well, let's just kick this off. Jeff, just give us a quick background, man. Like, who is Jeff Osterhout? How the heck did you get started in investment? What's your day job? If you give us a little bit of a flyover.
All right. Well, I'm actually sitting in my parents' house right now in Burley, Idaho. So grew up in a small town farming community and ended up in Utah to go to college. Almost became a lawyer, became roommates with Drake during that period of my life. Decided I was going to be miserable as an attorney. So I went 360 and became a firefighter. So I'm a full-time firefighter, which I love. I've been doing that for a little over 17 years now. I work in Salt Lake Valley. And, when I started, I'm like, oh, this is great. I've got security now. I had a wife and kids. So my 20s and 30s, I didn't worry so much about making money. I just wanted to ski, fish, and mountain bike. And as long as I had those toys, I was pretty content. And then once I got married, I realized, okay, I need some stability in my life. So firefighting was that way to do it. And then as I progressed in firefighting, I realized, I want to provide more for my family. I want to help my kids with college, go on trips, different things. So that's why I started looking into the real estate investing. And I didn't dive into it right away. There was some, I started talking to Drake because when I knew him, he was going to be an environmentalist and go to, was it Santa Barbara, Drake?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he too did a 360 and got into real estate and was successful. And I saw that. And so feel very fortunate, blessed to have Drake as a friend because I was able to run stuff by him. And like you said earlier, kind of held my hand through a lot of this process. So I listened to podcasts, I read books before I jumped into investing and got some advice from Drake that I could do a HELOC because I needed to come up with some capital to be able to start those investments. So I went down that road, and like you said, here I am a few years into it, and it's moving forward. I'm stoked. It's definitely, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm headed in that direction.
Awesome, brother. Thank you. That was great. That was a great overview. And maybe Drake, I want you to do kind of a similar, just real quick background and where you are now in terms of your investing. But maybe before we do, there's something that you touched on, Jeff, that I'm just curious about. You both had a path that was very different than kind of where you are now in terms of your real estate investments. What was the why? And you touched on it, Jeff, right? You wanted more security, but I'm wondering if you could just go a little deeper, and then you too, Drake, like what got you from the path of attorney and environmentalist to going, no, man, I'm really drawn towards this real estate investing and this idea of escaping the rat race and being cash flow positive. But is there anything you could share with us that was kind of a defining moment or the why behind why you made that pivot?
For me personally, I don't think there was one moment. It was more of a process. Like I remember doing the Spartan race with you and talking to Hillary, your wife, and her talking about you guys having your doors and living this lifestyle. And like, that sounds pretty fun. Because for a while, I don't know, maybe it was the way I was raised, but it seemed like wealthy people were not able to still go and do these fun things that I wanted my life to revolve around. And then I started realizing, hey, I can actually do more of these things and with real estate and not be like that attorney grind that scared me of having to bill 7-minute increments and get all these hours in to make partner. But I could still have this lifestyle, but have that income coming in to support the lifestyle. So it was definitely a process, but as I thought about it, it was the perfect fit to still allow for both sides of the equation.
Jeff, I love that. So you mentioned when we jumped on before we started recording that you and Drake are headed down. Are you guys going to the Salmon River? You going to the Middle Fork? Where are you going?
The Dolores in Colorado.
Okay, cool. How long are you guys going to be gone?
It'll be a quick one from Friday, come back Monday. Cool. But yeah, we're bringing the families. It's going to be awesome.
Where I was going with that was there's a quote from Warren Buffett that I think was in his most recent shareholder meeting. And he said, if you want to figure out how to be wealthy, figure out how to make money while you're sleeping. And it just occurred to me that you guys are headed out for a couple of day river adventure, and you're both going to be making money while you're on the river. So really, as you said, Jeff, it provides a means by which you can detach, and your income isn't tied to your time. Your income is tied to the assets that you have and how you've created cash flow from those assets. So really cool. I love it. It's a path to freedom is what I'm hearing for you. So Drake, what about you, brother? What's the why that got you moving down this path?
Pretty similar. When you and I first started working together, I think I told you that I wanted to be retired yesterday.
Yeah. That was disappointing to me, by the way.
I'm sure. But as I've evolved, I understand more that it's not about being really retired. It's about making work optional, right? It's about I like what I do, and I like teaching people and helping people build wealth and use real estate as a vehicle to do that. But I also want to be able to check out if it snowed 12 inches last night and just disappear because that's what I really like to do. So ultimately it's about, for me, again, building cash flow. I think of my real estate properties little as cash machines that are printing off money for me to live every month, right? And so that allows me the option to say, okay, I don't want to work today. I'm going to go ride my bike or ski or get on the river or whatever. So I'm not where I want to be with that yet, but I'm tracking that direction. And just in terms of number of doors and things, currently holding 25 doors, and 3 commercial properties, and then we're doing the flip right now as well. So
really cool. And you and I started investing nearly the same time. I think I bought my first property in 2001, which we sold and 1031 exchanged, and then immediately bought an 8-plex, which we still own. When did you buy your first property, and do you still own it?
November of 2005. Yeah. And I do still own it. It's like kind of the crown jewel in my, in my real estate portfolio. It's tripled in price since I bought it. And the cash flow has more than doubled since I bought it. Or the gross rents have more than doubled, which means cash flow has increased 100%.
Well, yeah, and you've also refinanced it to lower rates, right? Because you probably had that original rate at what, 6 or 7-ish?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I bought it in 2005, I think that they rang the bell for the top of the market. The day that I bought that property.
Drake's all in. We can go home now.
This is it. So it promptly after I bought it lost 30% of its value, right? Between 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. But then, and I had a bunch of like sleepless nights, right? Like,
Sure.
Man, this property's, what saved me though is the property was bringing in just a hair more than the payment, right? So I didn't have to do anything. I just had to like hold on and just keep making the payments, and time sorted me out, right? So 10 years later, the rents were higher. There was a little bit of space there. Rates came down. I was able to refinance and drop that payment and create a little bit more space or cash flow between the rents and the payment. And then just once that happens, you kind of can't screw it up, right? Like once there's a good positive cash flow, as long as you don't go spend that money on flat screens and boats, right? Like you just keep that, it's self-sustaining.
Beautiful. 2 lessons I want to pull out of there. Any real estate property or investment that you hold for 20 years is likely to become your crown jewel. Time is the arbiter of all things amazing when it comes to cash flow properties, because over long periods of time, you have rental inflation, where, as Drake said, his rents have, I think you said tripled. Did I get that right?
More than double.
More than doubled. Okay. So the rental income for the property is more than doubled over that period of time, but his mortgage payment didn't just stay the same. It got refinanced to a lower rate so that the delta or the spread between the mortgage payment and the cash flow, it has like this V effect, right? The mortgage payment goes down as you refinance and the income goes up. And then you look back in 20 years and you're like, wow, that's a meaningful amount of cash flow now every month, which I can then use to save to pay for another investment, or perhaps I took an equity line out to buy another investment property. I can use that cash flow to pay down the equity line, or I can just use it because I plan to extend my Colorado River rafting trip from Friday. But you have a lot of optionality when you've held a property for 20 years is my point. And then the other thing that I wanted to pull out of there is, we hear people say, fail faster, failing's good. And looking forward, it's really hard to understand that, because when property values went down 30%, you were not feeling like this was a really successful failure of yours, right? You were thinking this is like an epic failure. But in the rearview mirror, the lessons that came out of that, and by the way, you failed at a smaller investment and learned all those lessons, and then were able to hold on and turn it into a win. But if you hadn't learned that lesson, and now later in life, you're going yard, you're going for the fences. Now you're learning these lessons at a larger scale. So it's better to fail faster early. And then if you're lucky, you can hang on by your chin and make it through and then turn that into a victory.
For sure. One thing I've started saying in terms of the time piece of it is real estate is not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get rich for sure scheme. It just takes a long time.
Yep. And time cures all those mistakes, all those learning lessons, over a 20-year period, the rent inflation erases all those mistakes, and it's all good if you can hold on for that long period.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is a great start. What were you going to say, Drake?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. So,
I'll say something.
Please.
I should have listened to this podcast in my 20s. That's what I should have done.
Well, you mentioned partnerships, Jeff, too, and that's kind of, I wasn't in a partnership on my first one, but I did have a good business partner who was a mentor and straight up told me, he's like, if I were you, I'd buy an owner occupied fourplex, right? And I was 27 at that time, and I was, I guess, smart enough or dumb enough to just take that at face value and just do it. So that's that very first property. It was an owner occupied fourplex that I bought at 27.
How did you finance that at 27?
Well, back in the day,
2005, Jeff.
Oh yeah, good point. 2005, they're pretty
I fogged the
free and
mirror
loose
and
back
spelled
then.
my name at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I've jokingly said you either had to fog a mirror or spell your name, but not both were required to get a mortgage. You were good. Either one would be fine.
But I'll tell you, the only reason I was able to do that is because I had to verify 6 months of assets. So 6 months mortgage payments and assets. And because I was a savings nerd, I was that kid at 25 years old floating down the river as a river guide, asking all the wealthy people, how should I make money? What should I do with my money? And the takeaway was open a Roth IRA. So I opened a Roth IRA while I was a river guide with my savings over the summer. And I had that 6 months of verified assets that allowed me to do that. So
what a great lesson there. Yeah. I mean, if we go back the step before real estate investing, and one of the greatest, financial kind of foundational books is Richest Man in Babylon. And it's really simple, right? You have to earn more than you spend. You have to pay thyself first. And this was said really well by a financial advisor that I had on the podcast a while ago. I wish I could remember his name. But he said that he actually, before he went in as a financial advisor, Drake, he was a counselor as he was finishing up his degree at the university. And he would counsel older people that were nearing or inside of retirement age that had essentially blown it and, weren't going to be able to make it through with their finances because of, stock market reverberations or some sort of lawsuit or something terrible. And I asked him, I said, what were the lessons that you got out of talking to hundreds of elderly retirement age folks that didn't win successfully as it relates to their finances? Like, you get to the end of the game and you're like, crap, there's no way to start over. And I'm out of juice. And he said, it's super simple. He said, what I figured out was that poor families earn income, spend their money on expenses, and whatever's left they save. Wealthy families earn income, save, and spend what's left. So it's the same process. It's just a different sequence, which goes back to the Richest Man in Babylon, pay thyself first, is that the wealthy family would say, okay, here's how much money's coming into our checking account this month. I'm going to take 10, 15, 20%. It goes to savings now, whether that's your Roth IRA or whatever your investment vehicle is. And then what's left is what we have to live on. And guess what? They just live on that amount of money. They figure it out. They plant a garden. they don't go out as much. They don't travel as much. They camp instead of fly. Like they figure out how to have an existence that way. And then over 10, 20 years, you've got this big nest egg and you can start doing cool stuff with it. But it sounds like you learned that lesson very young from those folks you were taking down the river, Drake. Yeah,
Yep.
Cool. All right. That was fun. So let's go in. Jeff, I want to just hear a little bit about your properties, bud. So walk us through, let's just go back. So your first investment, walk us through each of those investments, how they came about. And what I really want to also make sure that we key in on is not just the outside game, right? The outside game is, hey, I had money over here in a retirement account. I borrowed it. I acquired the property. Like I want to hear all those tactics and tips that you would share. But really what I want to also understand is the inside game. How does one have the constitution to move into real estate investing? I'm guessing you're not in your 20s still. So you made a pretty big pivot.
Yeah.
And how did you emotionally have the constitution and confidence to do that?
Well, okay. So I'll see if I can verbalize all of that. First, I already explained that I was doing some listening to podcasts and I guess I kind of looked at it like people having babies. I remember having my first baby and driving away from St. Mark's Hospital and being like, this is nuts. Like they just let my wife and I leave with this creature. We are not qualified. So I listened to enough podcasts with people talking about real estate. It was similar. It's like, there's enough people doing this. They're successful that are probably not, they're more talented than me, but not a lot more. So I can do this too. So it was figuring out the vehicles, how to do it. And again, that's where having a partner and Drake with his expertise and giving me some options. So the first one was the 7-plex in Lexington. And Drake had already done some work in Lexington and had another property that he'd sold and had a team in place. So that was a big piece of the hurdle. I knew it made it easy having him because that piece was there.
Huge.
So we found this property. I don't remember the specifics of how we found it, but I remember we got it locked down. And then we went to Lexington to look at it after it was already purchased, contract signed, and they were already working on it. And it was more just to get away from the wives and kids, I think, and have a trip and to really, we couldn't back out of it at that point. So the mental piece was, just the having a partner. So that made me feel less risky, but there was still some heart-to-heart conversations with my wife and some nervous nights thinking about it because it was a big piece of money for me. I ended up doing a HELOC. I didn't want to dip into my savings. I too had been tucking away money in Roth and 401ks and 457. So we did the HELOC and we were able to make payments and acquire that 7-plex. And it's definitely going to be my gold or the diamond property in 20 years because it's in a great, like it was the shittiest property on that block. It's a great block close to downtown. And so far we've had no issues renting it and it's cash flowing well. But then things started getting harder to find in Lexington where we were looking. So we ended up finding a 4-plex in Frankfurt, so just outside of Lexington. And there was, for a minute, we almost bought 4 4-plexes with some other investor friends. That ended up falling through. So Drake and I just got this 1 4-plex and it's been easy. Kind of where slowly after we got it, we upped the rents right away because it was way undervalued. One tenant moved out. We were able to renew that property or that room. And then now we're slowly going to rehab all those other properties. So that put us at 11 doors pretty quick, or put me at 11 doors. And it was all from a distance and wasn't perfect. The COVID definitely added to the anxiety.
Oh yeah.
It ended up going over budget and way over time. Inspectors couldn't get in, but time will heal that. right?
So
As we already discussed.
provide a little clarity on that. So that first 7-plex we bought was as gnarly a place as you'll ever see. Like neither one of us would have spent the night there, right? Like it was I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. It was rough. So it was brought to us by a wholesaler. So someone went out and found this property and said, hey, person with a distressed property, I'm going to go find you a buyer, right? So they're like a little mini broker. And so they get a fee for finding this property and assigning it to us. So we bought the property. I think we looked at it for, it was about $320,000. And then we were able to do a construction loan with a bank in Lexington, like a regional bank. And then they lent us the majority of the money to fix it up. So then we bought it for $320 and really ground up rebuilt the thing for, I think, what did we say, Jeff? Another 300?
No, I think it was less. It was like 250. Out of my notes.
Something
270. 270 was construction loan.
So now instead of just buying a property sort of off the shelf, we like fully rebuilt this thing. All HVAC's new, all plumbing's new, everything's new, all flooring, all cabinets, everything. And like Jeff said, it was the worst property on a street that is very much like, $1 million single family residences, right?
Wow.
And it's like walking distance from the hippest part of downtown Main Street, and it's easy bike commute to University of Kentucky. So we really built the first property. And so what's cool about it though now is, we're essentially into it for say $750, and it's probably worth about $800 now. And the gross rents on it are about $7,500 a month. And we've got it on a 20-year loan, and it's cash flowing about $2,000 a month, right? So in 20 years, we're going to have a paid off property that's probably going to be worth $1.5 million or something like that.
And your rents will have doubled or tripled by that time.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe 15 grand a month in rent, something like that. So
really cool. Well, I wrote down a bunch of notes based on kind of that journey that you just described, Jeff. And I want to circle back to that in just a minute. But before we do that, so you guys have 2 multifamily properties that you are operating, and then walk us through this flip that you're doing, Jeff, and kind of how that came about and what your thoughts are around that type of an investment opportunity. And by the way, what are you going to do with the proceeds? Do you plan to 1031 exchange? Like, what's going to happen with it there?
That piece is still to be determined. So this flip is in Philadelphia, and it is with Brian Grimes, who I listened to his podcast with you. Yeah. So Drake made a friendship with him, and it has been a very, very cool experience watching it happen. It's similar. Found the property through a wholesaler, went out there to visit, found this property. And I remember when we went to check it out, like as a firefighter, I'm used to disgusting places. So walking through there, I was all right. But at one point, Drake got a little nauseous. And I mean, it was a dump. It stunk. The people that were living there weren't the cleanest people either. So anyways, we were able to buy this place from the wholesaler. And same, from the ground up, we have been watching this process happen where it's taken this terrible property and turn it into, like, I wish I could give you a little screenshot. It looks so sharp, and they've really done a good job with this property. So it is just about to go on the market any day now. We'll get that listed, and we're just determining kind of based on what we can get for it. If we talked about renting it a bit, but we're going to sell it, and then I'll either pay down my HELOC or we'll roll it into another property, but we're still kind of thinking our way through that.
Cool. So walk us through on that, just a little bit of the economics, and it doesn't have to be exact, but ballpark, what'd you pay for it? Ballpark, what was the construction component of the financing? How much cash do you have in terms of percentage? And then what's your upside look like? It's going to be after you pay realtors and whatnot.
Drake will do this piece better than me. So would he buy it for 130, Drake?
140 with the with the wholesale fee.
Okay. Yep. And so this is a hard money loan. We're out of pocket, very little. And yeah, the upside, like I said, we're still gonna have to figure that out, but I'll let Drake over those numbers.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we bought it for 140, and the construction bid up front was about $200,000 to renovate. And so this loan is pretty awesome. It allows you to buy with 100% loan to value, so no money down, and renovate. They give you all the renovation costs too. The crux is that it has to be 70%, no more than 70% of the after repair value. So they do an appraisal on the property as if it's already remodeled, and that appraisal came in at about $510,000. So 70% of that was about $350,000. And so we were able to get the $340,000 that we needed to acquire the property and do the renovation.
Fantastic.
So that's been it's pretty powerful. So I think we are out of pocket about $30,000 between the two of us in closing costs and the wholesale fee.
So out about 30,000, and what do you think you're going to sell it for?
It's looking like around 550. So net, I think we're going to net about 60,000. We did go over budget. We ran into a structural issue on the wall, on a rear wall of the home, and so that kind of cost us some time and some over budget. We were hoping for 100 to split between the two of us, but it's going to be more like, I think 60 is what we're looking at.
You turn the 60,000 and the 30,000 investment into 90,000 in capital when it's all said and done.
Basically, yeah.
Awesome, dude. That's a fantastic return. Great job. Your dollar per hour on that project is not bad, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there was not much we had to do, right? Just oversight.
Yeah.
The contractor when it was time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got some lessons out of that we're going to improve with Brian on potentially the next deal. So
when you make 60 grand on a deal and you learn lessons, that's a double win right there. That's a good thing. Like, you'll be able to do these things better next time now that you know these lessons. So that's solid. Jeff, let's go back now that we kind of understand your real estate portfolio and what you're up to. And by the way, incredible progress in 3 years, man. Like, really, it's really incredible, and especially in spite of like, think about over that period of time, right? We had COVID, then we had inflation, move into 7% interest rates, slow down in real estate. Like, there's 100 reasons why you should pause and not move forward. And so good on you for doing that. Let's talk about the inside game. Walk me through how you dealt with fear, how you overcame that, perhaps, how you and your wife worked through it from a relationship standpoint, but what can you tell us about overcoming fear to continue to move forward here?
That's a great question. It just happened by some of it's logical thought, overcoming the fear. It's like, and having goals that I want to achieve, and realizing if I just sit out and rely on my firefighter pension, I am not going to hit those goals. And I always, even as a child, I planned on being able to do all these cool things and provide for my family. And I realized it was going to be harder unless I did something. So there wasn't just this magic moment where all of a sudden the fear is gone. Like, I still at times get worried and stressed about things, but it's just having that end carrot is just leading me on. Another piece that we haven't discussed is I invested some money into your Alpine Valley shopping center. So I'm trying to just get some of these checks showing up in my mailbox, so when it comes time to retire, I can still live a life. So I'm afraid I'm not answering your question well as far as that inside game, but it's, if your listeners are thinking it's just going to all of a sudden be, smelling roses and easy, no, there's work that goes into it. I'm, working overtime to pay for some of the interest on the HELOC. I'm paying some dues, but I want something out of it, and it's worth it to me. And so I've got to overcome the fear, or I'll just be stagnant and I'll be that old person who's retired but working as a greeter at Walmart because I got to pay the bills, and I don't want that. I want to have that freedom.
Yeah, man. I think that answer was fantastic. What I got out of that answer was the fear never went away. I just compartmentalized it, and I had to decide which is going to lead me to more regret, right? If I fast forward 20 or 30 years, like you said, to the Walmart greeter age, you either are, going to get there and regret that you didn't take that chance, and you're going to have you can actually use that fear of regret of not taking the risk and not compartmentalizing it and going after what you really want. That's a pretty fearful outcome too. And in my mind, that's more fearful than taking a risk, making a mistake, learning, and continuing to move on. So I thought that was a great answer.
Right. No, that's stated better. And there's not mistakes. It's all learning experiences and yeah, progressing.
So I want to circle back, and then Drake, I'd love your thoughts on this too. But you alluded to, there were some heart-to-hearts with you and your wife. So you had to first overcome your own fear and say, all right, fear, you're over here, but where I want to go in life, who I want to become, how I want to provide for my family is over here. And I'm gonna pay attention to this more than I am going to listen to the voice of fear. So that was the first part. But then you had to go have that conversation with your wife, and you had to get her to see that vision. So walk us through what that looked like and any tips you might have for us.
Well, I was fortunate in that my wife, her brother was involved in real estate. Her father was. They both passed away early, unfortunately, but she'd seen the growth that can happen from real estate. And while she doesn't want to be real hands-on with it, she's busy with the kids and wonderful things she does, she didn't give me a lot of grief. But there was the conversations like, okay, well, we're going to have to tighten up right now, and we don't not really plant a garden, but go less trips, go out less. So let's tighten it up now. So in 10 years, we can be a lot more free. So there's that conversation. And I even had that with my kids. I live in Park City, and for your listeners that aren't aware, it's a fluent area, and their friends are able to do a lot more things than my kids are. But so I let them know, I'm like, hey, we're going to be a little more frugal now, so we can help you with college in the future. And so I'm trying to include my family. I'll show them videos of the property, and so they'll feel like, hey, look what we're making, look what our money's doing. And I want them to learn it, because I didn't really learn it at an early age. So I'm trying to get my wife a little hands off, but she's still involved, and we'll look at the videos and get my kids in the mix as well.
Such a great answer. You got buy-in. You're all going for the similar objective or goal, and you're starting. When I think about inheritance, I think money is the smallest piece of inheritance. I think when I think about inheritance, it's the passing down of wisdom or what we've learned. And if you've created a way to have those interesting and thought-provoking conversations with kids early, then you got a long runway of giving that knowledge inheritance to your kids. So that was a freaking beautiful answer, man. I love it. Drake, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I heard him say was that his why was greater than his fear.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's kind of what you got to get to. And like you said, the fear doesn't go away. Like I've been doing this for 20 years almost. And there's still fear and anxiety in there. Like, oh crap, this wall at the back of our property is an issue. Like there's just unknowns in real estate. That's just part of how it is. And you have to get a little bit comfortable with those things. And then what I also, I think kind of the reason I sort of originally brought this conversation up was that I was just impressed that Jeff was willing to sacrifice, like A, get over the fear, right? And B, willing to sacrifice because he's paying that, whatever it is, $100,000+ payment on his HELOC. That's not covered by the rent yet. So he's sacrificing in his daily life to make that payment. They're foregoing other things to make that payment for a future outcome. And I just think that's very far-sighted, right? I think that's what you have to do. You have to sacrifice now to do later. Like I think the quote is, if you live like others won't, you'll be able to live like others can't.
Love that.
Thank you.
Yep. It's very impressive.
I'd hug you if we were closer.
I have a feeling you guys can bro it out on the river this weekend.
Yeah, that'd be some throwing out for sure.
That's so good, dude. That's so good. So Jeff, I want to get back to this list of kind of takeaways that I wrote down. But before I do, let's say there's somebody out there that, is really contemplating this decision. Drake and I just did a webinar last night. You were there. And we realized there's this incredible opportunity right now that I showed a slide yesterday that mortgage rates during COVID, not just mortgage rates, but interest rates during COVID hit a 5,000-year low. And there's literally a book that studied interest rates back to, back 5,000 years ago, 3000 BC. And they've concluded that deflationary, worldwide deflationary period when everybody was locked up at the same time was like the biggest bout of deflation the globe had ever seen, and pushed interest rates, long and short-term interest rates, lower than they ever had before. And so a lot of people, me included, have these ridiculously low 5,000-year low mortgage rates at 2%, 3%, 4%. I think 80% of all mortgage loans, the dollars loaned on mortgages, are at a 4% or lower fixed rate. And so the whole purpose of that presentation was, look, if you're thinking about getting involved in real estate investing, if you want to focus on building cash flow versus just accumulating assets that you're going to spend down in retirement, if that's something you're interested in, you have been given the lifeline of lifelines. Like, this only happens once every 5,000 years, which is your 2.5% or 3.5% 30-year fixed loan. And as inflation's pushing rents up, like, holy cow, this is a massive opportunity. And we want at least people to be aware of that when they make their decisions. So let's say that you're that person, you haven't made a real estate investment, but this is all landing for you, and you're realizing the path that I'm on isn't going to get me the life that I want to live in the last 20 or 30 years of my life. But you still have, fear and trepidation over never doing it before. Any advice or anything that comes up for you that you would offer as it relates to that scenario and maybe helping people on that journey?
Yeah, my advice would be find someone that is better at the numbers. Some of the time, just seeing the numbers on a graph, on a chart, however your mind works, look at those numbers and see what the power of time will do for you. And obviously somebody you trust to give you those numbers that maybe doesn't have a dog in the fight, and do that. And then at some point you just have to pull the trigger. You just have to get over it and do it. It's like we've already verified, it's not going to be no fear involved. You're going to be nervous about it, but I think if you are judicious about it, you do some homework, but you don't overthink it. If you overthink it, you'll never find that deal. The deal will be gone by the time you do all the steps that it takes to feel good about it. There is going to be some risk, but it's not going to be a home run every time, but with time it will be a win and you'll learn from it. So fear won't go away, just do it. Solid.
Drake?
Yeah, I don't know what much else to say beyond that. Like, one thing that he said is find somebody that's better than you and get close to them. I would say in my life, that's one thing that I've been really good at. Like, when I was 18, I wanted to get into the outdoors. So I figured out how to become a river guide and figured out how to get a job at a bike shop to learn about those things and learn about the outdoors. Then I was interested in music. So I found people that were, better than me at that. Like I always want to be, I don't want to ever be the best person in the room at what I'm doing. Right. And when I got into real estate, like I've met mentors and surrounded myself with people that were better than me. When I met you, right? Like there's just finding people that are better than you and hanging out with them is one of the best things you can do in any situation in life.
That's so
Agreed.
powerful. And Jeff, you alluded to that, right? You
Yep.
mentioned, you kind of got a little bit of exposure to Hillary and what I was doing and what Drake was doing, and probably a few other mentors. And then as you're around those people, and like you said, you're like, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And you all of a sudden you have this belief, right? The quote from Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill is, what a mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve.
Jeez.
So how do you conceive and believe? Well, if I'm around a bunch of ladies and gentlemen who are crushing it at something, and before I thought that was impossible, it's like the 4-minute mile, right? Nobody could run the 4-minute mile until they could, and then high school kids now run 4-minute miles. But being around those people who are doing it, all of a sudden you can conceive, you can believe, and then that gap to achieve it gets really, really small. So that was a great tie down. Thanks for bringing that back up, Drake. Cool. Well, listen, I just want to go over a couple of notes that I took through your journey, and maybe as I go through this, feel free to add any more color. But here's what I took away from kind of your investment experience. It started with curiosity, right? You thought this was the path, and then you got curious around, well, what would it be like if I could create a situation where I was making money while I was sleeping, right? That cash flow. So it started with curiosity, and then it followed with education. You started listening to podcasts. You probably started asking really good questions. You started getting interested in that type of stuff, and then probably started to surround yourself with a few more people who are in that space to get to the place where you start to believe that you could achieve that. Then you found a partner / mentor in Drake, someone who is a little further down the path for you. Hopefully they can fast forward you through a few of the mistakes. That came with a team. So you had somebody to help you with maintenance. You had a realtor that you trusted. You had a property manager that you trusted. So a lot of that figuring it out, you were able to fast forward your way through. You had already accumulated some assets. So you were already intentional about home ownership. You had funded your retirement accounts. You had some liquidity. So that helps us feel a little bit more secure. Like, hey, if something goes terribly wrong over here, I've still got this other path that I can help soften the blow or perhaps hold me over for a period of time. So you already were applying that thought process of, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. You need to pay yourself first, even if that's going through traditional investment accounts. You bought the shittiest property on the block. That is a hallmark to success. Time and being surrounded by more affluent or higher end properties, you almost can't screw up that equation. That is a tide that lifts all boats if the rest of the houses around you are doing well. You found an area that had a high rent to price ratio. Every investor should know what a rent to price ratio is. I'll just give you a quick example. A year ago, and I don't know if this is true today, but when I was looking at this, San Francisco had the worst rent to price ratio. In other words, $2 million house rented for $500 a month. Wasn't quite that bad, but you get the point. It was extraordinarily high price and extraordinarily low rent. On the other side of that equation was it wasn't Detroit. It was Detroit, Michigan. So Detroit, Michigan had the highest rent to lowest price ratio. That doesn't mean you should put all your money in Detroit, because perhaps Detroit isn't growing as fast as San Francisco, but somewhere in the middle where you have a decent rent to price ratio and there's prosperity and jobs being gathered, that's where you want to buy. That's what you guys did. You found an area that had a decent rent to price ratio. And then you found a property where you could add value, increase the rents, and then wait it out for 20 years until the mortgage is gone. So what would you add to that? Because that's a lot of steps that you took that were absolutely spot on. Any other thoughts that come up or anything you'd like to add to that list of kind of wins?
No, I'm impressed you're able to take that many notes. One thing I would add, originally I started looking in Salt Lake area, and the whole reason I haven't invested there yet, eventually, maybe I will, but the numbers didn't work out for that reason. The rent to price ratio, I just couldn't buy something and rent it without me covering part of that mortgage, and I didn't want to do that. And so that's why I started out of state. Is the houses sell for a lot less, but rents aren't that much different, so you can cash flow, and that's a big part of my approach to the real estate. Is something that will cash flow. Might not appreciate as much, but for the short term, I want that cash flow.
Killer. Drake?
Yeah. The only thing that I would say, just from a security and safety perspective, is make sure you have liquidity. Like you said, you almost can't screw it up if you're buy the worst property on the nicest street in the nicest neighborhood. But the one thing that I've seen screw people up is not having liquidity, right? So let's say you have 3 vacancies and your HVAC fails in the same month, and you don't have any cash flow, and you have to come up with 10 grand. If you don't have it, you might miss a mortgage payment. Now you're behind, right? The way you protect yourself in real estate is having assets. And I think, just for a rule of thumb, 6 months worth of the mortgage payment is a sort of good minimum place to start. But if you can have assets to help weather you, because like you've said a couple of times in this conversation, time heals all, and liquidity helps you keep time moving on your behalf, if that makes sense.
Makes very good sense. And whenever I buy a new property, I have that same fear and trepidation that you talked about dealing with, Jeff. Like it doesn't go away. In fact, I'm looking at buying a new property right now, and I literally went through this process for an hour and a half this morning in my gym. And my thought process was, by what shift or construct could this investment fail or be deeply, the cash flow be deeply damaged, right? And I went through that whole list. And then on the other side of the equation, I said, okay, in what construct or circumstances could the economics increase and get vastly better, right? And I'm kind of looking at those two things. I'm going, all right, I feel relatively safe with that, but I'm about to potentially obligate myself to the single biggest indebtedness of my entire investment journey. So what would be the lifelines, or what would be the safety mechanisms that I could tap if something went wrong? Something on the left side of that page went wrong. How could I weather the storm, right? Could I open up an equity line on some of my other properties? Could I increase the amount of liquidity I have in my banks? Could I bring in another partner that brings more liquidity? Then just kind of going through a full list in my mind of how could I weather a storm if this thing went wrong. And I think that's a great idea. It's often said that banks have a hard time lending to you when you really need the money. So before I would ever need the money, maybe that's a good time to open up the equity lines, make sure I have sources of liquidity, and I have some sort of a fallback plan.
100%.
It's like a binky to a little baby, like sometimes you just need a blankie and a binky, and it's good to have those things. They give you the comfort you need to move forward. All right, guys. Well, this has been a total blast. Jeff, I'm so impressed, dude. You made a decision, you overcame the fear, and I wish you just massive, massive success. By the way, the Alpine Valley property that you co-invested with me on is the single greatest investment I've ever made in my life. So you did really well. We're gonna do very well as partners there.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Why don't I give you the closing words? Any final thoughts as we wrap up here today?
I remember I think there's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. I think that's a good sort of title for this episode. It's never too late to get started. I mean, Jeff started in his we'll say
20s.
40,
Easy
30,
now.
fourth generation, fourth
Easy
decade,
now.
fourth decade, 39 and a half years old again this year. And yeah, just feel the fear and do it anyways.
To that point,
Good.
Drake, my mom went back to law school in her 50s, and we didn't buy her first investment property until she was in her mid 50s. So if somebody's listening to this and thinking, well, I'm certainly not in my late 20s, it's too late. She's put together an incredible portfolio over the last 20 years, but didn't get started till her mid 50s. So, all right, everybody, this was a blast. Thanks for being here, Jeff. Thanks for being here.
No, it's great talking to you guys. Thanks for letting me talk.
You bet. We're going to have you back in 2 years, and you can tell us about the next 40 properties.
Excellent. I look forward to that.
Bye, you guys. Have a great day. Appreciate you being here.